My dad emptied my bank account after I refused to cover my sister's $15,000 debt. I simply said absolutely nothing. Next morning, a loud knock echoed through his pristine mansion, followed by the words, "Police, open up." Before I get into how an arrogant brother-in-law and my status-obsessed parents destroyed their lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your toxic family a lesson they will never forget. Growing up outside Atlanta, our image was everything. My parents, Brenda and Marcus, lived for their standing in elite circles of the Black community. They were pillars of the church and proud members of exclusive social clubs. But behind the custom doors of our estate, the reality was entirely different. I am Maya, 29 years old, and founder of a cybersecurity firm. I was the family rebel because I chose writing code over attending law school. My older sister Serena was the golden child. She married Liam, a white investment director who my parents believed elevated our profile. Liam wore tailored suits and spoke with unearned authority, but I always knew he was completely hollow. Everything imploded during our lavish Thanksgiving dinner. The table was perfectly set with crystal glasses and a towering floral centerpiece. We were finishing the main course when Liam reached into his tailored jacket. He casually slid a crumpled paper across the marble table, right until it hit my plate. It was a credit card statement for $15,000. I stared at it, then looked up at his arrogant smirk. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his bourbon, and told me that 15 grand was just pocket change for a tech CEO like me. He said I should consider paying off his wife's shopping debt as a thank you gift to the family for putting up with my rebellious phase. I did not flinch. I carefully placed my silver dining fork down, picked up the ridiculous bill, and dropped it right onto the floor. I looked him dead in his blue eye and told him I run a tech empire, Liam, not a charity for your wife's spending addiction. The room exploded instantly. My mother Brenda slammed her hand against the table, causing the glasses to shake. She dropped her refined persona and started screaming that I was a selfish disgrace to the family name. She yelled that I was acting exactly like the day I refused to study corporate law and shamed them by choosing a lowly computer science degree. "You will never be half the woman Serena is," she screamed, her face flushed with fury. "Serena knew how to marry a man of real status and elevate this entire family while you sit behind a screen all day." I let out a slow, cold laugh. The sheer hypocrisy was suffocating, but I was done protecting their fragile egos. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and reminded my mother exactly who her man of real status actually was. I asked the whole table if we were just going to pretend that Liam did not lose the family savings in a shady crypto scam just last year. I reminded them how I had to quietly scrub their compromised network and handle the cyber breach so Liam would not face a lawsuit. My mother's face drained of color while Liam gripped his bourbon glass so hard his knuckles turned white. My father Marcus immediately stepped in to crush my resistance. He slammed his fist down, demanding I pick up the bill from the floor and apologize to Liam immediately. Right on cue, Serena turned on the waterworks. She started crying fake tears, clutching her unpaid diamond necklace, whining about how I always ruined family holidays with my jealousy. She sobbed about the immense pressure she faced maintaining their perfect image in the social club and how I was deliberately trying to humiliate her husband. Looking around that lavish dining room, I realized they were entirely complicit in Liam's parasitism. They were willing to sacrifice my hard work just to keep up a lie. I refused to argue further. I stood up smoothly, draped my heavy wool coat over my shoulders, and picked up my purse. I walked over to Liam and leaned down so only he could hear me. I told him I could smell the absolute desperation on him. Without another word, I turned and walked straight out the front door, ignoring my father shouting that I was dead to this family. I thought walking out was the end of the drama. I was wrong. The next morning, I was standing in the kitchen of my high-security penthouse, calmly sipping an espresso. Suddenly, my encrypted phone flashed with a critical security alert. I opened my banking app and watched the numbers plummet. My parents had bypassed standard banking protocols and drained not just the $15,000 Liam demanded, but a full $50,000 from my account. They had used an outdated dormant power of attorney document from when I was an 18-year-old college student undergoing surgery. A text message from my father popped onto my screen a second later. It said, "Consider this a lesson in gratitude. Maya, we took extra to compensate for your profound disrespect." I did not cry. I did not scream or throw my phone. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face as I set my coffee mug down. I picked up my phone and dialed the general counsel for my cybersecurity firm. "They took the bait," I said smoothly into the receiver. "Trigger the federal trap immediately." What my greedy parents and arrogant brother-in-law did not know was that the account they just robbed did not hold my personal savings. They had just stolen money from the wrong people, and their perfect lives were about to be completely destroyed. My own parents drained my bank account overnight simply because I refused to cover my entitled brother-in-law's $15,000 debt. I said absolutely nothing. The next morning, a loud, aggressive knock echoed through their pristine mansion, followed by the angry words, "Federal agents, open up right now." Before I get into how an arrogant man and my status-obsessed family destroyed their own lives, let me know where you are watching this video from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your toxic family a very painful lesson. The silence in the dining room was deafening after I dropped that truth bomb. My mother sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, struggling to comprehend that her perfect image had just been shattered. Liam, my supposedly brilliant brother-in-law, gripped his crystal bourbon glass so tightly I thought it might break. His pale face flushed a deep, angry red, matching the cranberry sauce untouched between us. For a whole year, they had pretended his massive financial blunder never happened. They swept his catastrophic crypto losses under the rug and relied on me to clean up his digital mess just to save the family from public humiliation. Now the ugly truth was out in the open. My father, Marcus, immediately stepped in to crush my resistance and defend his golden son-in-law. He slammed his heavy fist down on the marble table, causing the silverware to clatter loudly. He demanded I pick up the credit card bill from the floor. Right that second, he told me I was going to apologize to Liam and clear the $15,000 debt as a penalty for speaking out of turn. Right on cue, my older sister Serena turned on the waterworks. She started crying loud theatrical tears, clutching her diamond necklace, a piece I realized was bought with stolen money. She sobbed about the immense pressure she faced maintaining their flawless image and how I deliberately humiliated her husband. Looking around that lavish dining room, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I realized they were entirely complicit in his parasitism. They were willing to sacrifice my hard work, my business, and my sanity just to keep up a lie. I refused to argue further. I stood up smoothly, pushing my chair back without a sound. I draped my wool coat elegantly over my shoulders and picked up my purse. I walked slowly around the table until I stood right behind Liam. I leaned down so only he could hear my voice. Told him I could smell the absolute desperation on him and his fake empire was already crumbling. I turned and walked straight out the front door, ignoring my father shouting that I was dead to this family. The next morning, I was standing in my kitchen sipping espresso. Suddenly, my encrypted phone flashed with a critical security alert. I opened my banking application and watched as the numbers plummeted. My parents had bypassed banking protocols and drained $50,000 from my account. They dug up an outdated power of attorney document from when I was an 18-year-old college student. A text message from my father popped onto my screen saying, "Consider this a lesson in gratitude. Maya, we took extra for your profound disrespect." I did not cry or scream loudly. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face as I set my coffee mug down on the granite counter. I picked up my phone and dialed the general counsel for my cybersecurity firm. "They took the bait," I said smoothly into the receiver. "Trigger the federal trap immediately." What my greedy parents and arrogant brother-in-law did not know was that the account they just robbed held no personal savings. They had stolen money from the wrong people, and their perfect fake lives were about to be destroyed. Unaware of the impending doom, Serena and Liam decided to gloat. I checked social media and saw their new posts. Serena uploaded a photo holding a designer handbag, while Liam showed off a luxury watch, The caption read, "Feeling blessed by family." Meanwhile, my mother sent toxic text messages offering a fake olive branch. She told me if I begged for forgiveness, she might return the leftover balance. Instead, I took digital screenshots of every post and veiled threat building an impenetrable digital dossier against them. The arrogant villains paraded their stolen wealth oblivious to the crosshairs. The scene transitioned to the dark, glowing server room of my cybersecurity headquarters. I stood before massive digital screens alongside my elite legal team. Here, my ultimate secret weapon was unveiled. The account my parents compromised was a federal escrow account containing seed money from the Department of Defense. My firm managed a highly classified cyber defense contract for the government, and those funds were strictly regulated. By wiring that money across state lines to pay off personal credit card debts. My parents did not just commit familial theft, they committed federal wire fraud and theft of government property. I authorized my automated security system to package the digital logs and alert the Financial Crimes Division of the federal government. The dominoes were officially tipped. The weekend brought the highly anticipated charity gala hosted by the elite social club my parents worshipped. The wealthiest members were gathered in their finest attire. I made a grand show, stopping entrance, radiating power, and wearing a stunning emerald gown. My family quickly cornered me, attempting to humiliate me. Liam, dripping in his white privilege, stepped directly into my personal space. He mocked my bankrupted status and told me I needed to learn my place. I did not even flinch. I gracefully clinked my champagne flute against his stolen luxury watch. I hoped he knew how to read it, because his borrowed time was officially up. I smiled warmly, knowing federal authorities were rapidly closing in on their exact location. The heavy silence that followed my revelation about Liam's crypto scam hung in the dining room air like thick smoke. For a fraction of a second, nobody dared to breathe. My mother's perfectly contoured face had completely frozen, while Liam stared down at his plate with his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. But the absolute truth was simply too uncomfortable for this family to sit with. They clearly preferred their expensive lies. My father Marcus finally shattered the quiet. He pushed his heavy mahogany chair back so violently that it scraped loudly against the polished hardwood floor. He stood up to his full height, attempting to use his booming patriarchal authority to completely crush my resistance. "Maya?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the Hamptons estate. "How dare you speak about your brother-in-law that way in this house?" He slammed his fist onto the table, causing the crystal wine glasses to rattle dangerously. I watched the dark red liquid slosh against the expensive glass, noting how incredibly ironic it was that they were furious at me for stating a simple financial fact. My father pointed a trembling finger at the crumpled $15,000 credit card statement still lying on the floor exactly where I had dropped it. "You are going to pick up that piece of paper right this second," Marcus demanded, his chest heaving with righteous indignation. "You are going to clear that debt tonight, and you are going to apologize to Liam for your profound disrespect. We do not air family missteps at the dinner table, and we certainly do not humiliate the man who elevated this entire family." The absolute absurdity of his demand was staggering. He was ordering me, his own daughter, to bow down and pay off a grown man's gambling and shopping debts just to maintain a fragile illusion of upper-class perfection. He was desperately protecting a parasitic son-in-law over his own flesh and blood. Before I could even formulate a response to his ridiculous ultimatum, my older sister Serena decided it was her turn to perform. Realizing that the spotlight had briefly shifted toward her husband's massive financial failures, she immediately pivoted to playing the ultimate victim. Serena let out a loud theatrical gasp and covered her face with her manicured hands, instantly turning on the waterworks. She began crying loudly, clutching the diamond tennis necklace around her throat, a necklace I now suspected was bought with the very credit card debt I was currently being ordered to pay off. "You always do this, Maya." Serena sobbed, her voice echoing shrilly across the long dining table. "You always find a way to completely ruin our family holidays because you are so bitterly jealous of my happiness." Her crocodile tears flowed freely, ruining her expensive makeup as she launched into a frantic monologue about her social standing. "Do you have any idea how much pressure I am under?" Serena wailed, gesturing wildly. "Do you know how hard it is to maintain our image in the elite Jack and Jill club? The women in that circle scrutinize every single thing I do. They look at my clothes, my house, my husband. We have an absolute standard to uphold in this community, and you coming here with your aggressive attitude is destroying everything we have built." She cried even harder, demanding that I stop trying to humiliate her husband and just be a supportive sister for once in my miserable life. She claimed I was trying to tear down Black excellence by refusing to help them out financially. The sheer hypocrisy of her using that specific phrase while begging me to pay a white man's luxury debt was suffocating. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the chaotic scene unfolding around me. I looked at my mother, who was now rushing to comfort a sobbing Serena. I looked at my father, who was still standing tall and glaring at me with pure hatred in his eyes. And finally, I looked at Liam. He was sitting there quietly, letting my entire family fight his battles for him. He had a faint, smug look returning to his pale face, clearly believing that parental pressure would force me to submit and open my wallet. In that exact moment, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. I realized that my family was not just enabling Liam's toxic parasitism, they were actively demanding it. They were entirely complicit in his financial abuse because protecting their fake rich aesthetic mattered more than my dignity or my hard-earned money. I refused to argue further. There was absolutely no point in trying to reason with people who were committed to living in a delusion. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. The contrast between my calm demeanor and their frantic emotional manipulation was stark. I did not raise my voice or shed a single tear. I reached over to the back of my chair and elegantly lifted my camel-colored Max Mara coat. I took my time draping the heavy, expensive wool over my shoulders, smoothing out the lapels with deliberate precision. My father kept shouting, demanding to know where I thought I was going before I apologized, but I completely ignored him. I picked up my designer handbag and walked slowly around the dining table. I stopped right behind Liam's chair. He stiffened visibly as my shadow fell over him. I leaned in very close, bringing my face down right next to his ear so only he could hear my final words. "I can smell the absolute desperation on you, Liam," I whispered, my voice cold and sharp as ice. "Enjoy the facade while it lasts, because your borrowed time is up." I straightened my posture and walked toward the grand entryway. My father bellowed from the dining room, threatening that if I walked out that door, I would be dead to them forever. He swore I would never be welcome in their home or their social circles ever again. Without a single backward glance, I stepped out the front door into the crisp autumn night. I pulled the heavy mahogany door shut behind me, cutting off his furious threats mid-sentence. I walked down the long, winding stone driveway toward my waiting car, feeling completely liberated. The cold air felt incredibly refreshing against my skin after sitting in that toxic house. They had made their choice, and now they would have to survive the devastating consequences without my money to save them. The drive back to the city was the most peaceful journey I had experienced in years. For the first time in my entire life, I did not feel an ounce of guilt about leaving my family behind. I woke up the next morning in my downtown penthouse feeling completely rested and utterly untethered from their toxic expectations. The early morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the sleek minimalist design of my apartment. I stood at the marble kitchen island wearing a silk robe, calmly brewing a double espresso. I watched the city wake up below me, enjoying the rare silence. I had spent years building an impenetrable fortress around my peace of mind and my business. As the founder of a premier cybersecurity firm, my entire life revolved around anticipating threats and neutralizing them before they could cause damage. I knew my parents and Liam would not just let my defiance slide. They were desperate people, and desperate people always make catastrophic mistakes when their backs are pushed against a wall. I just did not realize how quickly they would prove me right. I took a slow sip of my coffee when the heavy silence of my apartment was suddenly shattered. My encrypted personal server phone, which I kept strictly for high-level security monitoring, began flashing with a blinding red critical alert. A piercing alarm chimed through the kitchen speakers. I set my mug down and picked up the device, entering my biometric passcodes to unlock the screen. My secure banking application automatically opened, displaying a massive, unauthorized wire transfer that had been executed just minutes prior. I watched the green numbers on the screen plummet drastically. My parents had completely bypassed standard retail banking protocols and drained an astonishing $50,000 from one of my linked accounts. They did not just take the $15,000 Liam demanded to cover his luxury shopping debts. They took more than triple that amount in a single sweeping transaction. I pulled up the digital footprint of the transfer to see exactly how they managed to circumvent the biometric security walls I had established. The bank logs showed they had physically gone into a local branch office the moment it opened. They presented an outdated dormant power of attorney document to a junior bank teller. It was a piece of paper I had signed when I was an 18-year-old college student needing emergency surgery. I had completely forgotten that piece of paper even existed, but my parents had carefully preserved it in their secure files, like a loaded weapon waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Less than a minute after the alert cleared, my personal cell phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from my father Marcus popped onto the screen. I opened it and read the words he had typed with absolute arrogance. It read, "Consider this a necessary lesson in gratitude. Maya, we took extra to compensate for your profound disrespect last night and to cover the emotional distress you caused your sister." They honestly believed that stealing $50,000 would force me into submission and make me crawl back to them begging for forgiveness. They assumed I would desperately need that money back and would happily agree to pay off Liam's pathetic $15,000 credit card bill just to recover the rest of my stolen funds. It was a classic extortion tactic wrapped in parental authority. They wanted to break my spirit and fund Liam's parasitic lifestyle all in one ruthless move. Most people would have collapsed in sheer panic at seeing $50,000 stolen by their own flesh and blood. Most daughters would have burst into tears, screamed in betrayal, or immediately dialed the local police to report the theft. I did not shed a single tear. I did not scream or throw my phone against the wall. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. They had acted exactly as I predicted they would. Their boundless greed and absolute belief in their own superiority had blinded them to the reality of who they were dealing with. They still viewed me as the helpless college student they could bully and manipulate, rather than the ruthless tech executive I had become. I picked up my encrypted phone again and dialed the direct line for the general counsel of my cybersecurity firm. He answered on the second ring, knowing that a call from this specific device meant an immediate crisis. "They took the bait," I said smoothly into the receiver, my voice echoing off the quiet walls of my kitchen. "My parents just executed a $50,000 wire transfer using an obsolete power of attorney document." My lawyer remained perfectly calm on the other end of the line. "Understood," he replied, typing rapidly on his keyboard. "Do you want me to initiate a standard fraud claim with the retail bank to freeze the routing numbers?" "No," I instructed, taking another calm sip of my espresso. "Do not contact the retail bank at all. Trigger the federal trap immediately. Send the automated digital logs directly to the field office we coordinate with. Let them handle the asset recovery." I hung up the phone and looked out at the city skyline, feeling a surge of pure adrenaline. What my greedy parents and my incredibly arrogant brother-in-law did not know was that the specific account they just robbed did not hold my personal savings. I was far too smart to leave my private wealth exposed to an ancient legal document. The account Marcus and Brenda had just compromised was something entirely different. They had just initiated a hostile wire transfer from an account that held funds they could never possibly comprehend. They thought they were teaching me a lesson in respect, but they had just walked blindly into a devastating snare. Their perfect fake lives were about to be completely destroyed forever, and I was going to enjoy watching every single second of their spectacular downfall. The drive back to the city was the most peaceful journey I had experienced in years. For the first time in my entire life, I did not feel an ounce of guilt about leaving my family behind. I woke up the next morning in my downtown penthouse, feeling completely rested and utterly untethered from their toxic expectations. The early morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the sleek, minimalist design of my apartment. I stood at the marble kitchen island wearing a silk robe, calmly brewing a double espresso. I watched the city wake up below me, enjoying the rare silence. I had spent years building an impenetrable fortress around my peace of mind and my business. As the founder of a premier cybersecurity firm, my entire life revolved around anticipating threats and neutralizing them before they could cause damage. I knew my parents and Liam would not just let my defiance slide. They were desperate people, and desperate people always make catastrophic mistakes when their backs are pushed against a wall. I just did not realize how quickly they would prove me right. I took a slow sip of coffee when the heavy silence of my apartment was suddenly shattered. My encrypted personal server phone, which I kept strictly for high-level security monitoring, began flashing with a blinding red critical alert. A piercing alarm chimed through the speakers. I set my mug down and picked up the device, entering my biometric passcodes to unlock the screen. My banking application automatically opened, displaying a massive unauthorized wire transfer that had been executed just minutes prior. I watched the green numbers on the screen plummet drastically. My parents had completely bypassed standard retail banking protocols and drained an astonishing $50,000 from one of my linked accounts. They did not just take the $15,000 Liam demanded to cover his luxury shopping debts. They took more than triple that amount in a single sweeping transaction. I pulled up the digital footprint of the transfer to see exactly how they managed to circumvent the biometric security walls I had established. The bank log showed they had physically gone into a local branch office the moment it opened. They presented an outdated power of attorney document to a junior bank teller. It was a piece of paper I had signed when I was an 18-year-old college student needing emergency surgery. I had completely forgotten that piece of paper even existed, but my parents had carefully preserved it in their secure files, like a loaded weapon waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Less than a minute after the alert cleared, my personal cell phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from my father, Marcus, popped onto the screen. I opened it and read the words he typed with absolute arrogance. It read, "Consider this a lesson in gratitude. Maya, we took extra to compensate for your disrespect last night and to cover the emotional distress you caused your sister." They honestly believed that stealing $50,000 would force me into submission and make me crawl back to them begging for forgiveness. They assumed I would desperately need that money back and would happily agree to pay off Liam's pathetic $15,000 credit card bill just to recover the rest of my stolen funds. It was a classic extortion tactic wrapped in parental authority. They wanted to break my spirit and fund Liam's parasitic lifestyle, all in one ruthless move. Most people would have collapsed in sheer panic at seeing $50,000 stolen by their own flesh and blood. Most daughters would have burst into tears, screamed in betrayal, or immediately dialed the local police to report the theft. I did not shed a single tear. I did not scream or throw my phone against the wall. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. They had acted exactly as I predicted they would. Their boundless greed and absolute belief in their own superiority had blinded them to the reality of who they were dealing with. They still viewed me as the helpless college student they could bully and manipulate rather than the ruthless tech executive I had become. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed the direct line for the general counsel of my cybersecurity firm. He answered on the second ring, knowing that a call from this specific device meant an immediate crisis. They took the bait I said smoothly into the receiver, my voice echoing off the quiet walls of my kitchen. My parents just executed a $50,000 wire transfer using an obsolete power of attorney document. My lawyer remained perfectly calm on the other end of the line. Understood, he replied, typing rapidly on his keyboard. Do you want me to initiate a standard fraud claim with the retail bank to freeze the routing numbers? No, I instructed, taking another calm sip of my espresso. Do not contact the retail bank at all. Trigger the federal trap immediately. Send the automated digital logs directly to the field office we coordinate with. Let them handle the asset recovery. I hung up the phone and looked out at the city skyline, feeling a surge of pure adrenaline. What my greedy parents and my incredibly arrogant brother-in-law did not know was that the specific account they just robbed did not hold my personal savings. I was far too smart to leave my private wealth exposed to an ancient legal document. The account Marcus and Brenda had just compromised was something entirely different. They had just initiated a hostile wire transfer from an account that held funds they could never possibly comprehend. They thought they were teaching me a lesson in respect, but they had just walked blindly into a devastating snare. Their perfect fake lives were about to be completely destroyed forever, and I was going to enjoy watching every single second of their spectacular downfall. I am Maya, 29 years old, and founder of a cybersecurity firm. Last Thanksgiving, my father emptied my bank account because I refused to pay my sister's $15,000 credit card debt. I did not scream or cry. I simply smiled and made one phone call to my corporate legal team. My status-obsessed parents and arrogant brother-in-law had absolutely no idea the money they stole belonged to the federal government. Before I tell you how a loud knock brought their fake empire crashing down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your toxic family a painful lesson. Growing up, my parents, Brenda and Marcus, cared about exactly one thing: their pristine public image. They were the ultimate power couple, serving on church boards and hosting charity galas. Inside our home, however, their love was strictly conditional. I was considered the family disappointment because I chose writing code over attending law school. My older sister Serena was their absolute pride and joy. She cemented her golden child status by marrying Liam, an investment director, who my parents firmly believed elevated our family profile. Liam wore perfectly tailored suits and carried an unearned sense of white privilege, but I saw right through his confident facade. He was completely hollow, and my family was too obsessed with status to notice the truth. Everything finally imploded during our extravagant Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' Hamptons estate. The aesthetic was meticulously curated with crystal wine glasses, fine china, and a towering autumn floral centerpiece. We had just finished the main course when Liam reached into his jacket pocket. He casually pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and slid it across the marble table, letting it stop right next to my plate. It was a credit card statement for $15,000. I stared at the paper, then looked up at his arrogant smirk. He leaned back in his heavy dining chair, swirled his expensive bourbon, and announced that 15 grand was just pocket change for a tech executive like me. He demanded I clear his wife's shopping debt as a thank you gift to the family for putting up with my rebellious phase. I did not flinch. I calmly set down my silver fork, picked up the ridiculous bill, and dropped it onto the floor. I looked him dead in his pale eyes and told him that I run a tech empire, not a charity for his wife's spending addiction. The room exploded instantly. My mother slammed her hands against the table, causing the expensive wine glasses to rattle dangerously. She dropped her refined socialite persona and started screaming that I was a selfish disgrace to the family name. She yelled that I was acting exactly like the day I refused her demands to study corporate law and shamed them by choosing a lowly computer science degree. You will never be half the woman Serena is. She screamed, her face flushed with pure fury. Serena knew how to marry a man of real status and elevate this entire family while you sit isolated behind a computer screen all day. I let out a slow, cold laugh because the hypocrisy was absolutely suffocating. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the marble table, and reminded my mother exactly who her man of real status actually was. I asked the whole table if we were just going to pretend that Liam did not lose our family savings in a massive crypto scam last year. I reminded them how I had to scrub their compromised network in the middle of the night so Liam would not face a devastating lawsuit. My mother's face drained of color while Liam gripped his bourbon glass so hard his knuckles turned stark white. My father stepped in to crush my resistance using his booming patriarchal voice. He slammed his fist down, demanding I pick up the bill from the floor and apologize to Liam. Right that second, right on cue, Serena turned on the waterworks. She started crying loud, fake tears while clutching her unpaid diamond necklace, whining about how I always ruined holidays with my bitter jealousy. She sobbed about the immense pressure she faced maintaining their perfect image in the elite social club and how I was deliberately trying to humiliate her husband. Looking around that lavish dining room, I realized they were entirely complicit in his parasitism. They were willing to sacrifice my hard work just to keep up a lie. I refused to argue further. I stood up smoothly, draped my heavy wool coat over my shoulders, and picked up my designer purse. I walked over to Liam and leaned down so only he could hear my voice. I told him I could smell the absolute desperation on him. Without another word, I turned and walked straight out the front door, ignoring my father shouting that I was dead to this family. The next morning, I was standing in the kitchen of my high-security penthouse sipping an espresso. Suddenly, my encrypted phone flashed with a critical security alert. I watched my bank balance drop. My parents bypassed standard protocols and drained $50,000 from my account. They had used an outdated power of attorney document from when I was an 18-year-old college student undergoing surgery. A text message from my father popped onto my screen telling me to consider this a lesson in gratitude and that they took extra to compensate for my disrespect. I did not cry or throw my phone. A chilling smile spread across my face. I dialed the general counsel for my cybersecurity firm and told him they took the bait. I instructed him to trigger our federal trap immediately. My parents and brother-in-law had no idea the account they robbed held seed money from the government, and their perfect lives were about to be completely destroyed. The weekend finally arrived, bringing with it the highly anticipated gala. It was the ultimate gathering of the Black elite, where the wealthiest members of our community gathered in their finest attire to celebrate their success and donate to prestigious causes. The grand ballroom of the hotel was transformed into a breathtaking spectacle of crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, and flowing champagne. Men wore silk tuxedos, while women glided gracefully across the polished marble floors in gowns. My parents lived for this event because it was the stage for them to project their flawless family image to the world. I arrived at the venue precisely an hour after the heavy wooden doors opened. I stepped out of my vehicle wearing a gown that swept the polished floor with elegance. I did not look like a woman who had just been robbed of $50,000. I radiated power and unshakable confidence. As I walked into the grand ballroom, the surrounding conversations paused. Heads turned in my direction, and I could feel the gaze of the elite crowd following my step. I grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing waiter and scanned the room. It did not take me very long to spot my targets. My parents, Marcus and Brenda, were holding court near the main stage, surrounded by a group of wealthy elders and politicians. Serena was standing right beside them. She was proudly displaying the Chanel bag she had just purchased. Liam stood tall in his expensive tailored tuxedo, flashing his brand-new stolen Rolex to anyone who would bother looking. They were laughing loudly and soaking up the deep admiration of their wealthy peers, completely oblivious to the massive federal criminal investigation currently locking onto their exact geographic location. The exact moment my mother spotted me walking directly toward their exclusive circle, her fake socialite smile instantly vanished. Her brown eyes widened in genuine panic and shock before quickly narrowing into tight slits of pure venomous fury. She quickly tapped my father's right shoulder and gestured angrily in my direction. The entire family quickly excused themselves from the important politicians and moved rapidly to intercept me. Before I could ever reach the center of the crowded room, they corralled me forcefully into a dimly lit quiet corner near the heavy velvet window. Drapes hoping desperately to keep our confrontation hidden from their wealthy, influential friends. My father leaned in extremely close, his face glowing red with deeply suppressed rage. "What on earth are you doing here, Maya?" he hissed angrily through tightly clenched teeth. "You have an incredible amount of nerve showing your face at this elite event after the immense disrespect you showed us at Thanksgiving dinner." My mother immediately chimed in, crossing her arms tightly over her expensive sequined dress. She looked me up and down with utter and complete disgust. "Are you here to finally beg for your stolen money back?" she sneered softly. Because if you think you can just walk in here and ruin our most important night, you are sadly mistaken. You will get your remaining cash balance back only when you drop this aggressive, arrogant attitude and learn how to truly respect your generous family. I took a slow, highly deliberate sip of my cold champagne, perfectly unbothered by their hostile amateur intimidation tactics. I am not here to beg for a single thing. Mom, I said, my voice incredibly smooth and calm. I am simply here to enjoy the beautiful party. Before my parents could respond again, Liam stepped aggressively forward, pushing his way directly into my personal space. He was absolutely dripping in white privilege and unearned toxic arrogance. He looked down at me with a sickeningly smug expression, clearly relishing the false fact that he believed he had finally broken my independent spirit. Well, 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 look exactly who decided to show up. Liam mocked, his voice dripping with intense, terrible condescension. He adjusted his tailored suit jacket, making absolutely sure the shiny new Rolex caught the bright, sparkling light of the crystal chandeliers overhead. I bet your bank account is looking pretty sad and empty right now, is it not, Maya? That is exactly what happens when you try to act tough and disrespect the good people who generously took care of you. You really need to learn your proper subordinate place. You might play the big, powerful boss at your little tech company, but in the real adult world, your actions have very serious and severe consequences. You should truly listen to your parents and learn how to be a supportive, loving sister, instead of a bitter, isolated, angry spinster. Serena giggled maliciously from right behind him, holding her stolen Chanel bag much higher for me to clearly see. Just admit you were entirely wrong, Maya, she chimed in. Apologize to Liam, and maybe Mom and Dad will generously give you enough money to pay your penthouse rent this month. The sheer audacity of these arrogant thieves was almost comical to witness. They were standing in a room full of millionaires lecturing me about personal finances while wearing luxury merchandise bought entirely with stolen government funds. They honestly thought they had me successfully backed into an inescapable quiet corner. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice or react to their desperate, pathetic attempts at public humiliation and control. Instead, I took one graceful, deliberate step closer to Liam, directly invading his personal space, just as he had done to mine. I raised my crystal champagne flute and deliberately clinked it against the glass face of his brand-new, stolen luxury Rolex. The sharp ringing sound of glass hitting expensive metal echoed clearly in the quiet, secluded corner of the grand ballroom. Beautiful watch, Liam. I purred, my tone laced with a lethal and terrifying calm. I hope you know exactly how to read the correct time. Liam, I whispered softly, keeping my voice incredibly steady and utterly unwavering. Yours is officially up. Liam stood frozen, processing my final words. He masked his unease, straightening his silk tie. He wanted to fire back an insult, but the chime of a glass ringing through the ballroom interrupted him. The host stood at the main podium, signaling the presentation was beginning. My mother grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him toward the front row. VIP tables eager to secure the best seats. I remained in the shadows, watching them scurry away. The grand ballroom quieted down as the host introduced my father, Marcus. A wave of applause rippled through the crowd. My father stood up, buttoning his tailored tuxedo jacket with a smug expression. He confidently climbed the steps to the stage, basking in the admiration of his peers. He approached the microphone, smiling warmly at the sea of expectant faces. Behind him, a high-definition projector screen descended slowly from the ceiling. My father had insisted on personally controlling the visual presentation. He synced his smartphone directly to the venue's audiovisual system so he could seamlessly share candid family moments. The screen flickered to life, displaying a curated slideshow. There were towering images of my parents hosting charity events, Serena and Liam looking flawless on vacations, and my father posing with local politicians. It was a masterclass in visual manipulation designed to project an image of generational wealth and unblemished moral character. Thank you all for gathering tonight to celebrate the legacy we are building. My father began, his deep voice echoing perfectly through the speakers. He spoke passionately about family values and setting an example. He gestured grandly toward Serena and Liam sitting in the front row. He praised them, calling them the shining future of our family, and commending Liam for bringing exceptional business acumen into our fold. The hypocrisy was thick. I could practically taste it. He was lecturing the elite about integrity while knowing he had stolen $50,000 from his own daughter that morning. He tapped his smartphone screen, advancing the slideshow to a portrait of their Hamptons estate. "We build our homes on a foundation of trust," my father proclaimed proudly. He paused, letting the wealthy crowd absorb his profound wisdom. Serena beamed with pride while my mother nodded. Liam had regained his arrogant smirk, clearly believing my earlier threat was empty words. I took another slow sip of champagne, my eyes fixed intensely on the screen behind my father. I knew exactly what was happening behind the scenes. The federal trap I armed earlier that day was operating with flawless precision. I just needed to wait for the spectacular finale. Suddenly, the digital projector screen violently glitched, the curated photograph of the Hamptons estate distorted into a mess of pixelated static. The screen went entirely black for a fraction of a second. My father frowned, tapping his smartphone, looking annoyed by the technical interruption. He offered a charming chuckle to the crowd, making a terrible joke about needing to fire his IT department. Polite laughs echoed through the front rows. The giant screen flashed back to life, but it was no longer displaying his planned slideshow. It had switched to a crystal-clear live video feed. It took the audience a few seconds to process exactly what they were looking at. The image was a wide-angle shot of the front porch of my parents' lavish Hamptons estate. The smart doorbell camera system was streaming live directly to my father's phone, which was perfectly synced to the ballroom projector. My father turned around to look at the screen, and his smile instantly melted away. A collective murmur of confusion swept through the grand ballroom. On the massive screen, 12 heavily armed tactical agents, wearing dark windbreakers with bright yellow letters, FBI printed across their backs, were swarming the mahogany front steps of the estate. They were carrying heavy steel equipment and moving with terrifying, aggressive precision. Because my father connected his phone via Bluetooth to the audio system, the sound feed from the porch camera echoed loudly through the venue speakers. The audio was crisp and devastating. A loud, aggressive pounding noise shook the very walls of the elegant ballroom. Then a booming, authoritative voice thundered through the gala audio system. "Federal agents, we have a warrant. Open this door right now." The sound of a heavy steel battering ram smashing into the custom mahogany doors echoed like an actual bomb going off in the silent ballroom. On the massive screen, the doors violently splintered and burst completely open. The heavily armed federal agents flooded into the dark, empty mansion, sweeping the luxurious rooms with bright tactical flashlights. The live feed showed them completely dismantling the pristine physical facade my parents had spent decades ruthlessly building. The entire ballroom froze in absolute deafening shock. Hundreds of the wealthiest, most influential people in the city stood perfectly still, staring up at the screen in pure, unadulterated horror. The champagne flutes stopped clinking. The quiet, polite murmurs of the elite crowd completely vanished. Nobody in the room dared to take a single breath. My father dropped his smartphone onto the wooden podium. It clattered loudly against the microphone stand, but the live feed kept playing relentlessly on the screen behind him. His face drained of all color, transforming into a mask of pure, sheer terror. He looked down at his hands, which were shaking uncontrollably. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the microphone cord, unable to tear his eyes away from the live destruction of his home. I remained standing in the shadowy corner of the room, perfectly still and utterly calm. I watched as the horrifying realization of their total ruin finally washed over my family. The federal trap I set earlier had snapped shut with devastating precision. The money they arrogantly stole from the government had triggered the exact brutal response I orchestrated. Their fake empire of status and privilege was crumbling, live in high definition in front of the exact people they had sacrificed my mental health to impress. The silence in the grand ballroom lasted only a few agonizing seconds before sheer absolute chaos erupted. The wealthy attendees who had just been clapping for my father's pompous speech were now gasping in pure horror and backing away from the main stage. The mayor of the city, who had been sitting comfortably at the VIP table right next to my mother, quickly stood up and motioned frantically for his private security detail to escort him toward the nearest exit, completely avoiding any association with our ruined family. The prestigious pastors who normally praised my parents' generous church donations were whispering furiously among themselves, shaking their heads in utter disbelief. The pristine illusion of black excellence that my parents had ruthlessly constructed over decades was being publicly dismantled. Through the murmuring, panicked crowd, two tall men in sharp tailored suits stepped forward from the back of the elegant room. They did not look like the rest of the gala attendees. They moved with a distinct tactical purpose, pushing past the frozen elite socialites and making a direct, unyielding path toward the brightly lit main stage. They were plainclothes federal agents, and they had clearly been waiting quietly inside the venue for the exact moment the tactical raid on the Hamptons estate was confirmed by their field office. My father, Marcus, was still standing rigidly behind the heavy wooden podium, looking exactly like a cornered animal caught in headlights. He looked wildly to his left, and then desperately to his right, but there was absolutely nowhere for him to run. The exit doors were blocked, and his wealthy friends were turning their backs. The two federal agents marched heavily up the carpeted steps of the stage. One of them reached into his dark jacket pocket and pulled out a shining gold badge, flashing it directly at my father for the entire ballroom to witness. "Marcus, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud and the theft of government property," the lead agent announced, his authoritative voice carrying easily without needing a microphone. "Please place your hands behind your back immediately." My father, the arrogant man who had ruled our family with an iron fist and terrified me into submission for decades, looked incredibly small and pathetic in that moment. He slowly raised his trembling hands and allowed the federal agent to secure cold, heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. The sharp metallic click echoed through the silent room, sealing his undeniable fate. The elite members of the club pulled out their smartphones, recording the spectacular criminal downfall of the man they had worshipped just 10 minutes ago. Bright camera flashes lit up the stage, capturing my father being read his Miranda rights in front of the exact community he had sacrificed my mental health to impress. He kept shaking his head, mumbling desperately that there must be some kind of terrible mistake, that he was a highly respected businessman and a flawless pillar of the community. The agents completely ignored his pathetic, desperate pleas and began marching him forcefully down the stairs toward the main exit. My mother, Brenda, completely lost her mind. The flawless socialite facade she had meticulously maintained for her entire adult life shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She let out a piercing, hysterical scream that drowned out the nervous whispers of the crowd. She tried to grab my father's arm as the federal agents led him past her VIP table, but they firmly pushed her away, instructing her to step back. Her expensive professional updo began to unravel quickly, and her perfect makeup smeared darkly across her cheeks as hot tears of pure panic streamed down her face. She looked frantically around the large room until her wide, terrified eyes locked onto me, standing calmly and gracefully in the shadows. She pushed her way aggressively through the crowd of shocked onlookers, shoving aside the wealthy friends she usually desperately tried to please. She sprinted toward my dark corner of the ballroom, her expensive designer heels clicking frantically against the polished marble floor. When she finally reached me, she did not yell or threaten me like she had at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Instead, my incredibly proud status, obsessed mother dropped heavily to her bare knees right in front of me. She grabbed tight fistfuls of my emerald silk gown, her hands shaking violently as she looked up at me with sheer, unadulterated desperation. "Maya, please, you have to stop this right now," Brenda sobbed hysterically, her voice cracking with absolute terror. "Tell them it is just a simple family misunderstanding. Tell the police you made a mistake with your banking application, and we were just holding the funds for you safely. Please, Maya, you have to drop these charges right this second. They are taking your father away in handcuffs like a common criminal. You cannot do this to our family. You cannot humiliate us like this in front of the entire church board and the mayor. We will give you the money back, I promise. Just fix this." She was literally begging me to lie to federal authorities just to save their fake reputation. Even in the face of federal prison, her only concern was how this highly public arrest was humiliating her in front of her elite friends. She still foolishly believed she could manipulate me into fixing her catastrophic mistakes. I looked down at the woman who had spent my entire life telling me I was a worthless disappointment. I did not feel an ounce of pity or sadness. I felt absolutely nothing but cold, hard justice. I reached down and firmly grabbed my mother's wrists. I slowly and deliberately pried her trembling fingers off the expensive fabric of my gown, refusing to let her toxic panic soil my peace. I stepped back, forcing her to look up at me from her pathetic place on the floor. I looked deep into her panicked eyes and delivered the final crushing blow to her delusion. "I cannot withdraw a federal indictment, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, icy whisper. "You stole from the United States government." The words United States government hung in the dead silence of the ballroom like a physical weight pressing down on my mother's chest. For a moment, Brenda simply stared at me, with wide, unblinking eyes, unable to process the sheer magnitude of what I had just said. Her mind, which had spent decades meticulously calculating social climbing strategies and manipulating everyone around her, completely short-circuited. The federal agents standing a few feet away were already securing my father's wrists tighter, adjusting their grip on his tailored tuxedo jacket. The harsh metallic clinking of the handcuffs seemed to echo louder than any music that had played in this venue tonight. My mother slowly staggered backward, releasing the emerald silk fabric of my gown. She looked frantically from me to the federal agents and then toward the sea of wealthy socialites who were watching her spectacular downfall with morbid fascination. The elite members of the church board, the prominent politicians, and the wealthy doctors she had desperately tried to impress were all staring at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. That absolute look of public rejection finally broke her completely. Her carefully constructed reality fractured, and in her desperate, pathetic panic to save face, she decided to start screaming. "We did not steal it out of greed," Brenda wailed, her voice echoing shrilly across the cavernous marble ballroom. She threw her hands in the air, spinning wildly toward the federal agents and the wealthy crowd attempting to justify the unjustifiable. "We had no choice, you have to understand. We had absolutely no other choice. They were going to hurt us. They were going to take everything we owned." A collective murmur swept through the terrified crowd of socialites. My father, Marcus, who was currently being marched toward the exit doors by the federal agents, suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. He twisted his body around, struggling against the firm grip of the officers, his eyes wide with renewed terror. "Brenda, shut your mouth right now," he bellowed across the room, his deep voice cracking with sheer panic. "Do not say another word to these people." But my mother was completely beyond saving and entirely beyond logic. The adrenaline and absolute terror of facing federal prison had completely stripped away her filter. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly at Liam, who was trying to quietly slip away toward the service exit in the back of the ballroom. "It was all his fault," she screamed, her voice tearing through the silence. That $15,000 was not for Serena's shopping debt. It was never for clothes or expensive jewelry. It was extortion money. It was a mandatory weekly payment for the underground loan sharks. The collective gasp from the elite crowd actually sucked all the breathable air right out of the room. Women covered their mouths in horror, while men shook their heads in absolute disbelief. The flawless, pristine image my parents had violently protected was being decimated by her own hysterical confession. "Liam is a crippling gambling addict," Brenda shrieked, tears of panic and rage streaming down her face, ruining her expensive cosmetics. "He owes hundreds of thousands of dollars to violent criminals operating out of the city. They threatened to come to our house. They threatened to hurt our daughter. We only took that money from your account, Maya, because the loan sharks gave us a 24-hour deadline. We were trying to save our lives. I stood there perfectly still, absorbing this spectacular revelation. Even I had not anticipated the sheer depth of Liam's depravity. I knew he was a parasitic failure who had lost their savings in a cryptocurrency scam last year, but dealing with violent underground loan sharks was a completely new level of reckless desperation. But the absolute worst part was yet to come. My mother, unwilling to sink the ship alone, decided to drag Liam all the way down to the darkest depths of the ocean with her. She lunged forward, pointing aggressively at the cowardly white man who had brought ruin to our family. "Tell them what else you did, Liam," she shrieked, her voice hoarse and raw. "Tell the police how you secretly forged my husband's signature last month. He went behind our backs and illegally used our Hamptons estate as collateral for his massive gambling debts. He handed the deed to our home over to a violent mobster, and now they are going to take our house if we do not pay the weekly extortion fees." The silence that followed her explosive confession was heavier than lead. The entire ballroom of successful, proud Black professionals stared at Liam with utter contempt. This was the man my parents had constantly praised as the savior of our family. This was the man who sneered at my computer science degree and demanded I pay his debts as a token of gratitude. He was nothing but a degenerate gambling addict who had fraudulently signed away my parents' luxury estate to violent criminals just to cover his own pathetic mistakes. My father dropped his head, staring down at the polished marble floor. The federal agents did not need to push him anymore. All the fight had completely left his body. He realized his own wife had just publicly confessed to multiple new felonies, including extortion, conspiracy, and massive financial fraud, while simultaneously exposing his son-in-law as a criminal forger. The perfect family image was completely, utterly dead. The stern federal agents forcefully pulled Marcus forward, marching him through the heavy wooden double doors and out into the blinding, flashing red and blue lights of the waiting federal vehicles. I stood perfectly still and watched my mother collapse helplessly onto the cold, hard floor, sobbing violently into her shaking hands as the wealthy crowd simply turned their backs and walked away from her ruined legacy, forever sealing their miserable fate in absolute public disgrace and ensuring they would never be welcomed back into this elite society. As the double doors slammed shut behind my father, the remaining federal agents turned their sharp attention toward the back of the room. My mother was weeping uncontrollably on the floor, but her explosive confession had shifted the entire trajectory of the investigation. She publicly named Liam as the mastermind behind the forged collateral and the violent loan sharks. The lead agent locked his eyes directly on my brother-in-law. Liam realized his protective shield had evaporated into thin air. His smug smirk completely vanished, replaced by the terrified expression of a cornered coward. He looked desperately for an exit, but two officers blocked the main doors. With nowhere to run, Liam decided to do what mediocre privileged men do when faced with consequences. He played the victim and turned against the people who worshipped him. He smoothed down his tailored tuxedo jacket and took a cautious step toward the federal agents. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, altering his body language to appear innocent. He dropped the aggressive persona he used to intimidate my family and adopted the polished tone of a victimized executive. "Officers, you must listen to me," Liam pleaded loudly, ensuring his voice carried across the silent ballroom to the remaining guests. I had absolutely no idea what these people were doing behind closed doors. "You have to believe me. I am a highly respected investment director at Vanguard Group. I have a flawless professional record and an impeccable reputation in the financial sector. I would never in a million years associate myself with underground mobsters or illegal gambling rings." My mother stopped sobbing for a fraction of a second, lifting her tear-stained face to stare at her golden son-in-law in pure shock. Brenda could not comprehend that the white knight she had elevated above her own flesh and blood was now actively throwing her directly to the hungry wolves. "They are lying to you," Liam shouted, pointing an accusing finger down at my mother. "This entire family is completely corrupt. They have been secretly mismanaging their own finances and embezzling from their community charities for years. Now that you have finally caught them red-handed, they are desperately trying to frame me to cover up their own massive financial crimes." They are just trying to drag down a respectable white professional to save their own skin. I am completely innocent in all of this. I am just a victim of their toxic, elaborate manipulation. The sheer audacity of his cowardly lies was breathtaking. He was standing in a room full of black excellence, relying entirely on his white privilege to paint my parents as stereotypical criminals, while positioning himself as the naive, trusting outsider who had been cruelly deceived. He threw Marcus and Brenda entirely under the heavy wheels of the federal bus without a single second of hesitation. He did not care that Marcus was currently being loaded into a police cruiser outside. He did not care that Brenda was hyperventilating on the floor. He only cared about saving his own skin. Serena, who had been standing frozen in absolute shock near the VIP tables, finally broke out of her paralyzed trance. The flawless, glamorous illusion of her perfect marriage shattered violently in front of her eyes. The man she had paraded around as her ultimate trophy, the man she had allowed to drain our parents' bank accounts and verbally abuse me, was publicly denying any connection to her family. Serena let out a gut-wrenching, agonizing wail that echoed painfully through the empty spaces of the grand ballroom. She stumbled forward, her expensive designer heels catching on the hem of her custom gown. She threw herself toward Liam, completely abandoning whatever tiny shred of dignity she had left. She collapsed heavily onto the floor right at his feet and desperately grabbed the perfectly creased fabric of his tuxedo pants. "Liam, please do not do this!" Serena sobbed hysterically, her voice breaking with sheer, unadulterated panic. "Tell them you are lying. Tell them we are a team. We are supposed to be a team. Liam, you cannot just abandon me here after everything we have done for you, after everything my parents sacrificed to give you the lifestyle you wanted. Please look at me." She was pleading with the ghost. The man she thought loved her had never actually existed. Liam looked down at his sobbing wife with an expression of pure, unvarnished disgust. He did not see a partner or a loved one. He only saw a massive legal liability that was currently wrinkling his expensive trousers. "Get your hands off me, Serena!" Liam hissed viciously, his voice dripping with venomous contempt. He aggressively kicked his leg backward violently, dislodging her desperate grip from his pants. He stepped away from her, leaving her sprawled helplessly on the cold marble floor. "Do not touch me, you crazy woman," he spat, looking back up at the federal agents. "You see what I have been dealing with, officers. They are completely unhinged. You need to protect me from these insane people." I stood silently in the shadowy corner of the ballroom, watching the spectacular destruction of the golden child, and her perfect husband, Serena, was weeping violently into the floor, entirely broken and discarded by the parasite she had fiercely protected. Liam was busy smoothing his tie and attempting to charm the federal agents into letting him walk away free and clear. He honestly believed his corporate title and his arrogant privilege would serve as an impenetrable shield against federal wire fraud charges. He truly thought he had successfully pinned the entire elaborate crime on my ruined parents and secured his own safe exit. But he was fundamentally wrong. I took a slow, deep breath and placed my empty champagne flute onto a passing waiter's silver tray. It was finally time to step out of the shadows and close the trap entirely. I stepped out from the dim, shadowy corner of the grand ballroom, the heavy emerald silk of my evening gown brushing softly against the polished marble floor. The federal agents had just finished reading my father his Miranda rights, while Liam was busy adjusting his expensive tailored cufflinks. Completely convinced he had successfully manipulated his way out of a massive federal indictment. He was already taking confident long strides toward the main exit doors, leaving his sobbing wife sprawled helplessly on the cold ground without a single glance backward. I walked with deliberate, measured precision, directly intercepting his path. He stopped abruptly as my shadow fell over him, his fake, polite smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "Excuse me, Maya," he said, using that familiar, condescending tone he always reserved exclusively for me. "I need to speak with the authorities about your parents' unfortunate financial mistakes. So, if you would kindly step aside right now." I did not move a single inch. Instead, I stood my ground, blocking his only route to the exit, and looked him dead in his pale blue eyes. "You are not going anywhere, Liam," I said, my voice carrying a lethal icy calm that immediately wiped the remaining arrogance right off his face. "You really thought you could just blame an old man for a highly sophisticated digital wire transfer? Did you honestly believe that throwing Marcus and Brenda under the bus would magically erase your own digital footprint?" Liam scoffed loudly, puffing out his chest, trying to physically intimidate me in front of the observing federal agents. "I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about," he spat defensively. "Your corrupt parents stole your money. I am a respected investment director, and I am completely innocent in this ridiculous family drama. I would never risk my prestigious career for your pathetic bank account." I stepped even closer, completely invading his personal space, just as he had done to me earlier that evening. I leaned in so incredibly close that only he could hear the devastating truth I was about to deliver. "You see, Liam, the fundamental problem with arrogant men like you is that you always underestimate the women you consider beneath you," I whispered softly. "When my parents initiated that fraudulent $50,000 transfer this morning, they did not use a standard retail banking portal. They used a heavily monitored federal escrow account managed exclusively by my elite cybersecurity firm, and my proprietary software trace did not just catch the unauthorized theft. It caught the exact origin of the transaction down to the specific network node. The authorities have possessed this critical data since 9 o'clock this morning." The color began to rapidly drain from Liam's face as the terrifying reality of his situation finally started to dawn on him. "My security system logged every single keystroke," I continued, my voice sharp and unyielding. "The IP address that executed the fraudulent transfer did not come from my parents' Hamptons estate. It came directly from your private secure office computer at Vanguard Investment Group. You were the one who guided them through the complex authentication process. You were the one who clicked the final execution button. You left a glowing neon digital trail leading straight to your corporate desk. You basically handed the federal government a signed confession wrapped with a beautiful bow." Liam stumbled backward as if I had just struck him physically in the chest. Sheer, unadulterated terror flooded his eyes completely, replacing the arrogant superiority he had paraded around all night. He looked wildly around the room, suddenly realizing the federal agents were not looking at my father anymore. They were now looking directly at him. You set me up," Liam stammered, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic whine. "You engineered this entire elaborate thing just to frame me. I just smiled, a slow, chilling smile that promised absolute destruction. "I did not set you up, Liam," I replied smoothly. "Your own insatiable greed set you up. I merely provided the rope and you gladly wrapped it around your own neck. Nobody forced you to steal those federal funds." The lead federal agent, who had been quietly observing our intense interaction, finally stepped forward. He signaled to his partner, and they swiftly flanked Liam on both sides, cutting off any possibility of escape. "Mr. Liam Davies," the agent announced, his authoritative voice cutting through the remaining murmurs of the ballroom crowd. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest regarding the unauthorized transfer of classified government funds. We also have warrants to search your corporate offices at Vanguard Group to secure your hardware for forensic analysis. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back immediately. There is absolutely no way out of this building for you tonight. Your time running from justice has finally reached its end." Liam completely lost whatever shred of dignity he had left. He started thrashing wildly against the agents, screaming that it was all a giant misunderstanding and demanding to call his high-priced corporate lawyers. But the federal agents were entirely unbothered by his desperate wealthy privilege. They forcefully spun him around and slammed the cold steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists. The loud metallic click echoed beautifully through the grand ballroom. The golden son-in-law, the man who had mercilessly mocked my career and drained my family, was finally facing the ultimate reckoning. Serena watched from the floor, weeping hysterically as the agents dragged her husband away. The perfect illusion they had ruthlessly protected was now completely eradicated, and I stood victorious amidst the spectacular wreckage they had blindly created for themselves. Nobody could save them now. Their toxic reign of manipulation and abuse was permanently finished, and my new life of absolute freedom had officially begun. I took a deep, satisfying breath of the crisp, cool air as I walked out of that building, leaving them all behind in the dust. The blinding camera flashes from the grand ballroom quickly faded into the sterile, harsh lighting of a federal holding facility. My father, Marcus, and my arrogant brother-in-law, Liam, spent the entire weekend sitting in cold concrete cells before my mother could finally scrape together enough liquid assets to post their exorbitant bail. The absolute reality of their terrifying situation was incredibly crushing. They were no longer the untouchable elite pillars of their wealthy community. They were federal criminal defendants actively facing decades in prison. But instead of feeling a single ounce of genuine remorse or taking responsibility for stealing $50,000 from a government escrow account, they doubled down on their toxic delusion. Deep desperation breeds a very specific kind of ruthless malice. When they returned to their heavily mortgaged Hamptons estate, they did not sit around planning legitimate legal defense strategies. They sat in their luxurious living room and plotted a vicious, coordinated smear campaign against me. They realized they could not beat the irrefutable digital evidence in a federal courtroom, so they decided to completely destroy me in the unforgiving court of public opinion. They firmly believed that if they ruined my reputation and destroyed my business, I would be forced to drop the charges just to save my own livelihood. My parents aggressively activated their vast network of church leaders, local politicians, and wealthy socialites. They played their victim roles with absolute perfection. Brenda cried real tears during Sunday service, standing right at the pulpit to ask for urgent prayers for her deeply troubled daughter. She painted a horrifying fictional picture of me as a sociopathic, jealous woman who had completely lost her mind. She told the entire congregation that I was so bitterly envious of Serena's flawless marriage to Liam that I intentionally fabricated complex digital evidence just to send my own innocent father to a federal penitentiary. Marcus nodded solemnly from the front pew, dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief, while claiming I was trying to steal the family estate out of pure spite. Liam used his privilege to perfection. He attended exclusive country club luncheons and told his wealthy peers that he was simply trying to help his troubled sister-in-law manage her failing finances when she maliciously framed him. They spun a web of lies so incredibly thick and emotionally manipulative that the elite circles swallowed it whole. The rumor mill worked overtime, and the venomous whispers spread through the community like a devastating wildfire. The aggressive whisper campaign did not just stay confined to Sunday services and charity galas. It rapidly bled into my professional life. In the elite world of corporate cybersecurity, reputation is the absolute foundation of your entire business. When wealthy investors and corporate executives hear rumors that a tech founder is mentally unstable and actively framing her own family for financial crimes, they start to get incredibly nervous. A few of my smaller retail clients began calling my corporate office expressing deep concern over the terrible allegations floating around the country club. My executive assistant fielded dozens of probing emails from local business owners who had heard Brenda's tearful church speeches. By the end of the week, the negative local press and the relentless elite gossip caused my company's stock to take a minor but highly noticeable dip. My board of directors even requested an emergency meeting to discuss the growing public relations nightmare. My family had successfully weaponized the intense pressure of our elite community to back me into a tight corner. They were hitting me right where they thought it would hurt the absolute most. Back at their Hamptons estate, Serena and Liam were busy celebrating what they believed was a spectacular victory. They popped expensive champagne and toasted to their own brilliant manipulation. They honestly thought they had effectively neutralized my power by turning the entire Black elite community against me. They assumed I was currently sitting in my penthouse crying over my dropping stock prices and begging my legal team to find a quiet settlement. They thought the immense social isolation would break my independent spirit and forced me to submit to their demands just like it always did when I was a vulnerable teenager. They completely underestimated my absolute resilience. I did not care about the whispered gossip of hypocritical socialites or the temporary dip in my portfolio. While they were busy hosting pity parties and spreading vicious rumors, I was sitting in my secure office calmly analyzing their every move. I watched them exhaust their social capital and dig their graves even deeper. Their coordinated smear campaign was nothing but a pathetic distraction from their impending legal doom. They thought they were winning the war, but they were just playing checkers while I was finalizing a devastating game of chess. I knew that this aggressive public relations attack was merely the first phase of their desperate strategy. Their true goal was never just to humiliate me in front of the local politicians and church elders. They wanted to systematically dismantle my credibility so that my federal evidence would be questioned in a court of law. Liam was especially terrified of the irrefutable IP address logs I had handed over to the authorities. He knew that social gossip could not magically erase hard digital facts. Therefore, he convinced my parents to push the narrative that I was a brilliant but deeply disturbed hacker capable of manufacturing fake digital trails. They began planting stories claiming I had a long history of erratic behavior and vindictive retaliation against anyone who did not bow to my wishes. They essentially tried to convince the world that I was a dangerous cyber criminal rather than a successful executive. But I just sat back and let them keep talking. Every lie they told to the press and their wealthy friends was meticulously recorded by my legal team. They were cheerfully walking right into the next phase of my carefully orchestrated trap without realizing it. The sheer arrogance of my family was honestly staggering, but their desperation was becoming increasingly dangerous. When the social gossip and country club whispers failed to force me into dropping the federal wire fraud charges, Liam and Serena decided to drastically escalate their vicious attack. They realized that ruining my reputation was not going to save Liam from a federal prison sentence, so they shifted their focus directly to my most valuable assets. They needed to completely paralyze my cybersecurity firm to strip away my power, and they found a ruthless way to attempt it. They hired a notoriously sleazy, aggressive attorney known for his completely unethical courtroom tactics to launch a devastating legal strike against me. This lawyer specialized in weaponizing the legal system against vulnerable family members, and Liam paid him an exorbitant retainer fee to orchestrate a hostile takeover of my entire life. They knew they could not defeat my digital evidence in a legitimate criminal court, so they decided to bypass the criminal justice system entirely and attack me through civil litigation. Their malicious strategy was as brilliant as it was utterly repulsive. They formally petitioned the local family court, claiming that the extreme stress of my high-pressure career had triggered a severe psychological breakdown. They officially requested that a judge place me under an emergency conservatorship, rendering me completely powerless over my own personal and professional decisions. To support this absolutely bogus lawsuit, Liam and Serena went to terrifying lengths to manufacture false evidence. They leveraged their remaining connections in the wealthy social elite to hire a corrupt private psychiatrist who was perfectly willing to compromise his medical license for the right price. Together, they forged a series of highly questionable medical evaluations and deeply flawed psychological profiles, painting me as a paranoid, delusionally vindictive woman who had lost touch with reality. The documents blatantly lied, asserting that I was actively suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and that my claims of federal wire fraud were simply hallucinations born from my deeply rooted jealousy of my older sisters, flawless marriage, my mother. Brenda gleefully provided a sworn written statement to the corrupt attorney, claiming she had witnessed my mental decline over several years. She swore under oath that I was spending my tech fortune erratically and posed a severe danger to myself and the local community. The sheer evil of her sworn statement took my breath away. She was perfectly willing to legally declare her own flesh and blood mentally incompetent just to save her golden son-in-law from a well-deserved prison sentence. The conservatorship petition requested that Serena be appointed as my permanent legal guardian, giving her immediate and total control over all my corporate assets, my personal bank accounts, and my physical movements. However, this malicious conservatorship was never really about managing my personal well-being or protecting my mental health. The entire fraudulent lawsuit was a highly targeted tactical strike aimed directly at the historic brownstone located in the heart of the city. My grandmother had left that massive multi-million-dollar property exclusively to me, and I had spent the last 5 years transforming it into the highly secure corporate headquarters of my cybersecurity firm. It was the central, nervous system of my entire technology empire, housing my private servers, my dedicated staff, and the highly classified federal contracts I managed for the government. By filing the emergency conservatorship petition, Liam's sleazy lawyer successfully convinced a sympathetic judge to temporarily freeze all my major physical assets, pending a formal psychological evaluation. This meant my access to the historic brownstone was suddenly thrown into extreme legal jeopardy. Their calculated move was designed to immediately paralyze my entire business operation. If I lost physical control of my headquarters, I would be in direct violation of multiple strict security protocols required by my high-level federal contracts. I would lose millions of dollars in revenue. My prestigious clients would abandon my firm, and my entire independent life would completely collapse overnight. Liam honestly believed he had finally discovered the perfect, devastating vulnerability in my armor. He knew exactly how much my cybersecurity firm meant to me, and he wanted to use the frozen brownstone as his ultimate bargaining chip. The villains assumed that the terrifying prospect of losing my corporate headquarters and my government contracts would absolutely crush my rebellious spirit. They wanted me to feel the exact same suffocating panic they felt when the federal agents battered down their pristine mahogany front doors. They were convinced that the intense legal pressure would force me to crawl back to the family, begging for an amicable settlement. They sent my corporate legal team a formal letter outlining their extortion demands. They proposed that if I voluntarily contacted the federal authorities and formally retracted all my digital evidence, claiming that the $50,000 wire transfer was just a simple, authorized family loan, they would immediately drop the bogus conservatorship lawsuit. They promised they would graciously allow me to keep my historic brownstone and resume my business operations, as long as I publicly cleared Liam's name and saved Marcus from federal prison. They truly thought they had successfully backed me into an inescapable legal corner and stripped away my remaining power. It was a brilliantly evil strategy that would have completely destroyed a weaker person. The thought of having my grandmother's beautiful legacy seized by my greedy sister and her parasitic husband was nauseating. They expected me to panic and surrender everything to protect my livelihood. But I honestly did not panic at all today. I simply handed the extortion letter to my general counsel and instructed him to schedule a formal mediation meeting with Liam's sleazy lawyer. I was not going to surrender my historic headquarters, and I certainly was not going to drop the federal charges. I was simply preparing to bring my absolute ultimate secret weapon to the intense negotiation table today and end their pathetic toxic game permanently, once and for all time. I walked into the downtown law office with my general counsel by my side, feeling unfazed by the legal ambush awaiting me inside. The sleazy attorney Liam hired operated out of a dismal building that reeked of cheap cologne and desperate settlements. The conference room was a stark contrast to my pristine corporate headquarters, featuring scuffed fake mahogany and outdated leather chairs. As I stepped through the heavy glass doors, the scene unfolding before me was comical in its sheer arrogance. Liam was already sitting right at the head of the long conference table, acting as if he owned the entire building. His sickeningly smug smirk was fully restored, erasing the terrified coward who had been handcuffed by federal agents just days prior. The sheer audacity of his posture was truly staggering. He kicked his expensive leather shoes up onto the polished surface of the table, crossing his ankles with an air of absolute, unearned superiority. Beside him sat my mother, Brenda, wearing a beige suit chosen to make her look like an exhausted, dignified peacemaker rather than a willing co-conspirator in federal wire fraud. The sleazy attorney stood hovering in the corner of the dim room, looking like a hungry shark waiting for a drop of blood in the water. I did not let their aggressive posturing affect my calm demeanor. I pulled out my chair and sat down smoothly, keeping my posture perfectly straight and my expression completely unreadable. Placed my sleek leather briefcase gently onto the table, keeping my hands folded neatly in my lap. Liam did not bother sitting up properly to address me. He casually reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick bound legal document, dropping it onto the table with a loud slap. He used 2 fingers to slide the heavy non-disclosure agreement directly across the smooth surface until it stopped right in front of my hands. He leaned back heavily into his chair, lacing his fingers behind his head, and told me he was generously giving me one final chance to save myself from total ruin. The sleazy lawyer stepped forward, pacing slowly around the table to outline the extortion they disguised as a legitimate legal settlement. The terms they presented were simple and utterly disgusting in their sheer audacity. They demanded that I immediately contact the federal authorities and formally retract every piece of digital evidence I had submitted to the Financial Crimes Division. I was ordered to lie directly to the FBI and officially claim that the $50,000 wire transfer was a massive system error caused by a critical glitch in my proprietary security software. They wanted me to completely destroy my pristine professional credibility, just to keep Liam out of a federal prison cell. Furthermore, they demanded a public act of complete humiliation. The contract required me to issue a formal press release to the major media outlets, stating that Liam and my father, Marcus, were completely innocent of all financial crimes I was supposed to publicly declare, that my immense work stress had caused a severe psychological break, leading me to make false, damaging accusations against my own loving family. In exchange for committing federal perjury and destroying my corporate reputation, Liam promised to graciously drop the bogus conservatorship lawsuit freezing my major assets. He looked down his nose at me and stated with a sickening, patronizing smile that he would mercifully allow me to keep my historic brownstone headquarters. He claimed he would let me resume my business operations undisturbed as long as I learned my proper place and followed his explicit instructions moving forward. Before I could even formulate a verbal response to his ridiculous extortion attempt, my mother leaned forward, placing her manicured hands flat on the table. She looked at me with cold, dark eyes, completely devoid of any maternal warmth or genuine affection. She coldly commanded me to pick up the pen and sign the legal paper right this instant without any further argument. She began preaching in her familiar, condescending tone about how the family desperately needed to heal and how my stubborn, foolish pride was actively destroying our prestigious legacy. She told me with a completely straight face that Liam was being incredibly generous by offering me a safe way out of the messy situation I had selfishly created. She spoke to me as if I was an unruly teenager who needed to be disciplined rather than a highly successful technology executive who had just been robbed. Brenda actually had the nerve to look me in the eye and say that blood is always thicker than pride. She demanded I do the right thing immediately to save my father from spending his senior years rotting in a federal prison cell. She insisted that my technology company was meaningless compared to the sacred bonds of our family and the reputation we held in the elite community. Liam let out a soft, arrogant chuckle, clearly enjoying watching my own mother ruthlessly tear me down to protect his parasitic lifestyle. They sat there glowing with toxic, triumphant energy, radiating a repulsive sense of unearned victory. They honestly believed they had me completely checkmated in this dirty legal game. They thought the intense, terrifying threat of losing my multi-million-dollar business and having my grandmother's historic brownstones seized had successfully broken my independent spirit. The sleazy lawyer tapped his gold pen against the contract, urging me to sign on the dotted line so we could all move forward. The villains in the room were convinced their coordinated psychological warfare and bogus legal maneuvers had stripped away my power. They expected me to reach for the pen with trembling fingers and surrender my life to their control. They assumed I was terrified of losing the empire I built from the ground up. They had no idea I was simply waiting for them to finish their arrogant speech so I could unleash the destruction I had waiting quietly inside my leather briefcase. I kept my eyes locked on Liam's smug face, refusing to show even a hint of fear. I was about to teach them all a final lesson they would never forget. The heavy silence stretched across the conference room, becoming thick and suffocating. The sleazy lawyer shifted his weight uncomfortably, tapping his expensive gold pen against the polished wood surface. He cleared his throat loudly, attempting to break the intense quiet, but I did not even blink. I simply sat there staring directly into Liam's pale blue eyes. My complete lack of reaction was deeply unsettling to them. Liam let out a loud, dramatic sigh, shifting in his oversized leather chair. He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, planting his elbows aggressively on the table. "What exactly are you waiting for, Maya?" he demanded, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Do you need a special engraved invitation to save your own life? Just pick up the pen and sign the document before I completely change my generous mind." My mother Brenda immediately chimed in, leaning forward to mirror Liam's aggressive posture. "Stop playing these pathetic childish games, Maya," she snapped, her voice echoing harshly against the thin office walls. "You have already embarrassed this family enough for one lifetime. Do you honestly think you have any leverage left in this situation? You are about to lose that precious historic brownstone and your entire business reputation. Sign the settlement right now and apologize to your brother-in-law so we can finally put this horrible nightmare behind us." She pointed a trembling manicured finger at the thick non-disclosure agreement sitting right down in front of my folded hands. I did not reach for the gold pen. I did not acknowledge my mother's pathetic attempt at maternal manipulation. I simply let the agonizing silence stretch out even further until the tension in the room became absolutely unbearable for them. The sleazy lawyer looked nervously from Liam to Brenda, clearly realizing that their psychological warfare was completely failing. I slowly unlocked the golden clasps of my sleek designer leather briefcase. The sharp metallic clicks sounded incredibly loud in the dead quiet room. I reached inside and retrieved a heavy, thick manila folder. It was securely bound with a bright crimson red-colored wax seal. I lifted the heavy folder out of my briefcase, holding it up briefly so the harsh fluorescent overhead lighting caught the crisp embossed logo printed directly on the front cover. It was the unmistakable corporate insignia of Vanguard Investment Group, the exact massive financial institution where Liam proudly served as a senior investment director. The moment Liam recognized his own corporate logo, his arrogant smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Confusion flashed across his face, followed quickly by the flicker of deep internal panic. He had absolutely no idea why I possessed highly classified secret internal documents from his incredibly prestigious employer. I did not offer any immediate explanations. I smoothly dropped the heavy red-sealed folder directly onto the center of the conference table. It landed with a loud, definitive thud, landing squarely on top of their ridiculous extortion contract, completely burying the non-disclosure agreement underneath it. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs elegantly, and rested my hands on the table. I kept my posture perfectly straight, projecting nothing but pure, unadulterated power. The sleazy attorney instinctively reached a hand out toward the Vanguard folder, but Liam aggressively swatted his arm away. Liam stared down at the red wax seal, his chest suddenly heaving as his breathing became shallow and fast. "What is this?" Maya Liam demanded, his voice completely losing its former confident swagger. "Where on earth did you get internal documents from my company? You have absolutely zero clearance to possess Vanguard corporate files. I am going to have you arrested for corporate espionage on top of everything else." My mother looked frantically between the heavy folder and Liam's panicked face, clearly sensing that the power dynamic in the room had just violently shifted out of their control. She demanded to know what kind of desperate trick I was trying to pull. I smiled, a slow, chilling smile that froze the blood in their veins. "I do not need your permission to possess those files, Liam," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, quiet calm. "And I certainly do not need you to graciously allow me to keep my historic brownstone or my cybersecurity company. You see, Liam, while you and Serena were busy hiring cheap lawyers and forging fake medical documents to steal my grandmother's legacy, I was busy executing a massive financial maneuver of my own. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table, and locked my eyes directly onto his terrified face. The venture capital fund that I secretly own and operate did not just sit idle this week. Yesterday morning, while you were celebrating your bogus lawsuit, my firm finalized a completely hostile takeover. We aggressively purchased the controlling majority shares of Vanguard's entire Eastern Division. I bought the debt, I bought the assets, and I bought the exact corporate branch where you currently work. They thought they could steal from me without facing any severe consequences. Liam's mouth fell wide open. He looked exactly like a fish suffocating on dry land. He shook his head in absolute denial, stammering that such a massive corporate acquisition was completely impossible without his knowledge. I simply gestured toward the heavy folder sitting on the table. I told him to go ahead and break the red seal. The sleazy lawyer stood completely frozen, realizing he had backed the wrong horse in this brutal legal war. Open the folder and turn to page 2. Liam, I commanded, my voice echoing with absolute undeniable authority. Read the corporate buyout signatures for yourself. Read the newly established executive hierarchy. Because as of yesterday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, I am the controlling shareholder of your entire division. I am the one who signs your lucrative paychecks. I am the one who controls your massive stock options. Turn to page 2, Liam, because I am officially your new boss. Liam stared down at the crisp white paper inside the heavy red sealed folder. His pale eyes scanned the dense legal text, but his brain clearly refused to process the devastating reality printed in stark black ink. I watched his pupils dart back and forth across the page, tracking the official signatures of Vanguard's board of directors. The silence in the mediation room was so absolute, I could actually hear his rapid, shallow breathing. He flipped to the second page just as I had instructed, his trembling fingers leaving sweaty smudges on the heavy paper. There at the very bottom of the acquisition agreement was my signature, sitting boldly next to the outgoing chief executive officer. My venture capital firm now held total, unyielding operational control over his entire financial division. This is a forgery, Liam stammered loudly, his voice cracking into a pathetic wheeze. He slammed his hand flat against the document, but he lacked the strength to make it sound intimidating. You cannot just buy a major corporate division overnight, Maya. This takes months of regulatory approval and board meetings and shareholder votes. You are completely bluffing. I did not raise my voice or break eye contact. I bought the toxic debt. Liam, I explained with precision. Vanguard was quietly bleeding massive amounts of capital in your specific division, because directors like you were severely mismanaging client portfolios to cover personal margin calls. My firm approached the board with a highly aggressive cash buyout offer last week. They were incredibly eager to offload the massive liability. The regulatory paperwork cleared at dawn. It is not a bluff. It is a hostile corporate takeover, and you are sitting directly in the blast zone. The sleazy attorney leaned over Liam's shoulder to closely inspect the legal seals on the documents. The color immediately drained from the lawyer's face as he recognized the authentic corporate watermarks. He slowly took 2 large steps backward, distancing himself from his wealthy client. The lawyer knew a catastrophic sinking ship when he saw one. Now that we have established the new chain of command, I said smoothly, folding my hands together on the conference table, we must discuss your future at my company. Liam Davies, effective as of this exact second, your employment at Vanguard Investment Group is officially and permanently terminated. You are fired. My mother. Brenda gasped loudly, clutching the lapels of her beige suit. Maya, you cannot do this, she shrieked, her voice echoing loudly in the small room. You cannot just fire your own brother-in-law. He has a family to support. He has children. You are destroying his life over a misunderstanding. I ignored her outburst, keeping my focus on the ruined man across from me. You are not just experiencing a standard corporate layoff. Liam, I continued, my tone dropping to a terrifying whisper that cut through the room like a razor blade. You are being terminated for extreme, gross ethical violations. During our brief due diligence audit yesterday, my forensic accounting team uncovered the massive crater of your corporate embezzlement. We found the unauthorized margin accounts you illegally created, found the illicit transfers you used to cover your escalating underground gambling debts. Liam opened his mouth to deny the severe accusations, but absolutely no sound came out. He looked exactly like a desperate man, standing on the gallows waiting for the wooden floor to drop out from beneath his feet. Furthermore, I added, leaning slightly forward, you blatantly violated your fiduciary duty and committed severe intellectual property fraud. But your absolute worst offense was conducting illegal federal wire transfers using Vanguard Company hardware. You used a secured corporate terminal to steal $50,000 from a heavily monitored government escrow account. That is a direct violation of strict federal banking regulations, and it places Vanguard in extreme legal jeopardy. The consequences of a termination for extreme cause are quite severe, I told him, savoring every single syllable. Because you actively defrauded your employer. Your incredibly lucrative executive stock options are entirely voided immediately. Every single unvested company share you thought would fund your lavish country club lifestyle has been officially canceled. You will receive absolutely no severance package. Your corporate pension has been permanently revoked due to your criminal malfeasance. You are leaving this building with absolutely nothing. You are instantly, completely ruined. Liam gripped the sharp edges of the conference table, his knuckles turning stark white. He looked like he was going to be physically sick right there on the polished wood. You cannot leave me with nothing, he pleaded, his previous arrogance completely replaced by sheer raw naked terror. I will lose my house. I will lose everything. Serena will leave me. You have to give me a severance. You have to give me something to survive. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for the parasite who had gleefully mocked my career and demanded I pay for his wife's designer handbags. I smiled a cold, empty smile. I am giving you exactly what you deserve, Liam, I said quietly. But before you start worrying about how to pay your country club membership fees, you should probably focus on staying out of a federal penitentiary. Liam froze, his eyes widening in pure horror. What do you mean? He choked out, his voice shaking violently. To seal this corporate transition, I explained smoothly, my voice devoid of any sympathy. Vanguard's legal department had a strict obligation to report your internal crimes. Yesterday evening, my corporate security team walked directly into your private office. We boxed up your work laptop, your encrypted cell phone, and your entire internal hard drive network. We did not even bother reviewing all the hidden files ourselves. Vanguard's general counsel voluntarily surrendered every single piece of your corporate hardware directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. The sheer magnitude of his destruction finally crashed down onto him. The federal agents did not just have the IP address from my personal security trace anymore. They now possessed his actual physical computer. They had all of his internal emails, his hidden gambling ledgers, his illegal margin calls, and the undeniable digital proof that he had orchestrated the massive theft of government funds. He had absolutely nowhere to hide and nobody left to blame. The sleazy lawyer did not say a single word to defend his paying client. He simply reached down, grabbed his leather briefcase, and walked straight out of the conference room, abandoning Liam completely. My mother sat frozen in her chair, staring at me as if she was looking at a terrifying stranger. She finally realized that the obedient scapegoat daughter she used to bully was completely dead. In her place sat an untouchable executive who had just systematically dismantled a white-privileged millionaire without raising her voice. Liam slumped forward, burying his pale face in his trembling hands, as his entire fake world collapsed into complete ash. The devastating reality of Liam's termination set off a catastrophic chain reaction that completely obliterated my family's carefully constructed world. Without the powerful protective shield of Vanguard Investment Group, his massive web of financial lies violently unraveled overnight. The federal authorities did not just stop at seizing his corporate hard drives. They launched a full forensic investigation into his personal banking history, discovering a horrifying labyrinth of underground gambling, debts, and illegal margin calls. The truth bled out into the unforgiving public eye, exposing the golden son-in-law as nothing more than a degenerate criminal parasite. Serena was sitting in the lavish living room of the Hamptons estate when the federal agents arrived to execute a secondary search warrant on their personal assets. She had spent the entire morning crying over her husband being fired, but she still foolishly believed he was just an innocent victim of my vindictive corporate takeover. That pathetic delusion was violently shattered when a federal forensic accountant handed her a stack of printed bank statements. Serena stared at the numbers in absolute horror, discovering that Liam did not just illegally forge her father's signature to gamble away the family mansion. He had committed an even more unforgivable betrayal. He had secretly accessed the private accounts Serena set up for their two young children and completely drained their entire college funds, every single penny, just to pay off his violent loan sharks. The flawless facade of the golden child and her perfect high society marriage shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Serena let out an agonizing scream of pure betrayal, finally realizing that the white knight she had worshipped and fiercely protected had ruthlessly robbed her own children blind. She immediately turned on him, furiously packing his designer suits into cheap garbage bags and throwing them out onto the manicured front lawn. She filed for emergency divorce the very next morning, publicly declaring him a monster in a desperate, pathetic attempt to salvage her own ruined reputation. But the elite community had already turned their backs on her. My father Marcus faced an even darker and more terrifying reckoning. The federal wire fraud charges against him were absolutely ironclad, thanks to the digital trap I had flawlessly executed. He desperately tried to hire an expensive, high-profile defense attorney to fight the indictment. But the overwhelming evidence, including his own arrogant text messages bragging about stealing my money, left him with absolutely no viable defense strategy. Recognizing that a massive public trial would only bring more devastating humiliation upon his fractured family, he was forced to swallow his massive pride and accept a harsh plea deal. Exactly 1 month after the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood before a federal judge in a crowded downtown courtroom, looking thoroughly broken and incredibly old. The federal judge did not show him a single ounce of mercy, reprimanding him severely for abusing his parental authority and attempting to steal classified government funds. Marcus was formally sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary. The man who had spent his entire life demanding absolute respect and ruthlessly crushing my independence was marched out of the courtroom, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit and heavy steel chains. His prestigious legacy was permanently reduced to a federal inmate number. My mother, Brenda, suffered the most agonizing psychological destruction of them all. Her entire identity was intrinsically tied to her supreme status in the Black elite community. She lived exclusively for the admiration of the church board and the exclusive social clubs, relying heavily on their validation to fuel her massive ego. But the highly public arrest of her husband and the spectacular criminal downfall of her prized son-in-law turned her into an instant social pariah. The exact people she had sacrificed my mental health to impress aggressively slammed their heavy doors right in her face. The supreme humiliation occurred during the annual church board meeting. Brenda attempted to walk into the sanctuary wearing her usual designer clothes, acting as if she was still the untouchable matriarch of the congregation. She honestly believed her long history of generous financial donations would buy their continued loyalty. She was catastrophically wrong. The senior pastor stopped her right at the heavy wooden doors flanked by the entire executive board. They coldly informed her that she was being publicly stripped of her presidency, effective immediately. They told her that her family's massive financial crimes and toxic greed had brought unbearable shame to their prestigious congregation, and she was permanently exiled from the church. The devastating rejection did not stop there. The elite Jack and Jill Club formally revoked her lifetime membership, sending a highly public courier to deliver the termination papers. Her wealthy country club friends completely stopped answering her desperate phone calls. When she walked down the affluent streets of her neighborhood, people would literally cross to the other side just to avoid being seen, breathing the same air as her. She was entirely stripped of her power, her title, and her fake. Friends leaving her completely isolated in a rapidly crumbling world. With their external empire completely decimated, my family violently turned their remaining toxic energy onto each other. The Hamptons estate transformed into a bitter hostile war zone during the final agonizing weeks before the bank foreclosure. Serena viciously blamed Brenda and Marcus for pushing her to marry Liam just for his white privilege and fake status. Brenda screamed at Serena for bringing a parasitic criminal into their pristine home. Marcus blamed Brenda for encouraging the theft of my bank account, leading directly to his prison sentence. They viciously tore each other apart in loud, hateful arguments that echoed through the empty halls of the mansion they were about to lose. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Now that a single gust of reality had blown through their lives, every single card had fallen, scattering into the dirt. Liam was awaiting his own criminal trial, sitting in a damp cell, completely abandoned by the family who once worshipped the ground he walked on. Serena was packing her bags, preparing to move into a tiny, cramped apartment with her children stripped of her designer wardrobe and her unearned superiority. Brenda was left alone to wander the empty rooms of the foreclosed mansion, crying over photographs of a life that never truly existed. They had spent decades projecting an image of flawless familial love, but underneath the expensive clothes and forced smiles, they were nothing but greedy, selfish strangers. When the money and the status finally disappeared, they had absolutely nothing real left to hold on to. They destroyed their own family with their insatiable arrogance, and I watched their spectacular collapse from the absolute pinnacle of my thriving tech empire, feeling nothing but profound and lasting peace. The inevitable conclusion to their massive financial disaster finally arrived when the bank officially foreclosed on the luxurious Hamptons estate. The heavy wooden doors of the mansion were locked tight by federal authorities, and bright yellow eviction notices were plastered across the pristine front windows. Serena and Brenda were completely stripped of their unearned wealth and their fake social standing. The elite community they had desperately worshipped entirely turned their backs, leaving them with absolutely zero resources and nowhere left to hide. They had exhausted every single favor and burned every single bridge in their toxic pursuit of status. With my father Marcus sitting in a federal prison cell and Liam facing his own devastating criminal charges, my mother and sister were finally forced to face the harsh, unforgiving reality of the streets. They had absolutely nowhere left to turn, so they decided to swallow their remaining pride and seek out the one person they had spent decades ruthlessly abusing. I was reviewing a new government cybersecurity contract in my downtown penthouse when my head of building security alerted me to a disturbance in the lobby. He informed me that two women claiming to be my immediate family members had somehow managed to bypass the front desk and sneak into the private resident elevator. I did not panic or call the police right away. I simply locked my digital workstation, smoothed down my tailored designer suit, and calmly walked out of my apartment to face them. Heavy steel elevator doors chimed softly and slid open, revealing a pathetic scene that I will never forget for the rest of my entire life. Brenda and Serena were standing in my private marble foyer, looking completely unrecognizable from the glamorous, wealthy socialites they used to be. They were physically exhausted. Their clothes were wrinkled, and their faces were swollen from days of endless crying. The most shocking detail was what they were carrying in their hands. Instead of the limited edition Chanel bags and expensive matching designer luggage they used to flaunt, they were now desperately dragging cheap, scuffed plastic suitcases that looked like they had been pulled straight out of a discount bin. It was a profound far cry from their former radiant glory. The absolute contrast between my highly secure, luxurious penthouse lobby and their miserable, broken appearance was staggering. The exact moment I stepped out into the foyer and looked down at them, their last remaining shreds of dignity completely vanished. They did not try to insult me or demand my respect like they used to do. Instead, both my mother and my golden child sister violently collapsed onto their knees, right on the cold, hard marble floor. They completely broke down, sobbing hysterically and frantically, reaching out toward my expensive leather shoes. Serena was weeping so hard she could barely form a coherent sentence. She grabbed the hem of my pants, begging me for a warm place to stay tonight, and pleading with me to pay for a decent lawyer to help her navigate her messy divorce from Liam. She cried that her children were currently staying with a distant relative, and she had absolutely zero money to feed them or put a roof over their heads. Brenda chimed in, wailing loudly and slapping her hands against the marble floor. She begged for my ultimate mercy, asking me to open my home and my wallet to save them from total homelessness. When I remained perfectly still and completely silent, looking down at them with eyes as cold as ice, my mother decided to unleash her ultimate manipulative weapon, the exact same toxic guilt trip she had used to control my entire life. Brenda tilted her tear-stained face upward, looking at me with pure, desperate agony. She screamed that we are blood, Maya, and nothing can ever change that sacred fact. She reminded me loudly that she gave birth to me, that she carried me in her womb, and that I owed her my very existence just for bringing me into this world. You cannot be this incredibly heartless to your own family, she wailed, her voice echoing pitifully against the high walls of my private lobby. You cannot just stand there in your fancy, expensive penthouse and watch your own mother and sister starve on the street. We made some terrible mistakes, but we are still your family, and you have a moral obligation to help us survive this tragedy. I listened to her desperate, manipulative words bouncing off the pristine walls of my quiet lobby, and I felt absolutely nothing but profound disgust. This was the exact same woman who had spent decades ruthlessly tearing down my confidence and actively trying to sabotage my independence. She was the same mother who had proudly paraded her golden child around the country club while hiding me away like a shameful, dirty secret. She was the same person who had conspired to steal $50,000 from my bank account just to feed her arrogant son-in-law's destructive gambling addiction. Now that her entire fake empire had violently collapsed and her beloved white knight had completely destroyed their lives, she suddenly wanted to weaponize the sacred bond of motherhood to save her own skin. Serena kept weeping uncontrollably, her tears staining the polished marble floor. She begged me to forgive her for filing that bogus conservatorship lawsuit claiming that Liam had forcefully coerced her into doing it. She sobbed that she was just a terrified mother, trying to protect her children from a cruel, unforgiving world. The sheer hypocrisy of her pathetic excuses was breathtaking. She had been perfectly willing to declare me mentally incompetent and eagerly tried to steal my grandmother's historic brownstone just days ago. But now she wanted me to play the role of her generous, loving savior. They were both staring up at me with wide, terrified eyes, desperately waiting for me to break down and offer them my immense wealth and unconditional forgiveness. I stood perfectly still in the center of the grand marble foyer, letting their desperate cries wash over me without absorbing a single ounce of their toxic panic. My mother and sister remained collapsed on the cold floor, their tear-stained faces turned upward in a pathetic display of manufactured agony. They were waiting for my tough exterior to finally crack. They expected the dutiful daughter and sister they had bullied for decades to miraculously reappear, to swoop down and offer them my immense wealth and unconditional forgiveness. They honestly believed that parading their self-inflicted misery and weaponizing the sacred concept of family blood would instantly erase the undeniable fact that they had ruthlessly tried to destroy my entire life. I looked down at Brenda and Serena, absorbing the absolute finality of this spectacular moment. I did not feel the sudden urge to scream at them. I did not feel the need to gloat or rub my incredible success in their tearful faces. There was no lingering anger left in my heart, and there was certainly no pity. I simply felt an overwhelming, profound sense of ultimate power and deep internal tranquility. The chaotic noise of their desperate begging sounded like a distant, fading echo. I slowly reached down and unclasped my sleek designer handbag. The sharp metallic click of the latch echoed clearly through the vast, empty space of the penthouse lobby, silencing their hysterical sobs. For a fraction of a second, Brenda and Serena held their breath, watching my hands with wide, desperate eyes. They truly thought I was reaching for my checkbook. They thought I was pulling out the keys to a luxury guest house or retrieving a thick stack of cash to save them from the unforgiving streets. Bypassed my leather wallet and reached into the deepest zippered pocket of my bag. My fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper I had carried with me ever since that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. I slowly pulled out the single sheet of paper, keeping my expression entirely blank. It was the original crumpled, wine-stained credit card statement that Liam had arrogantly slid across the dining table, demanding I pay his $15,000 shopping debt. I held the wrinkled document between my index finger and thumb, letting it hover in the air right above their heads. "Blood does not steal from blood to feed a parasitic deadbeat," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence like a razor blade made of solid ice. I opened my fingers and let the piece of paper drop. We all watched in total silence as the crumpled document fluttered slowly downward, swaying back and forth in the quiet air, until it landed softly right on the cold marble floor, exactly between my mother's and my sister's. Trembling knees. "Here's the 15 grand. You wanted so desperately," I told them, my tone devoid of any emotion. "Consider it the price of a highly necessary lesson." Brenda stared down at the stained credit card bill, her face draining of all remaining color, as the devastating reality of my words finally hit her. Serena let out a sharp, agonizing gasp, covering her mouth with her shaking hands as she recognized the exact document that had triggered their entire catastrophic downfall. They finally understood that I was never going to save them. I was never going to pay for their mistakes. They had dug their own miserable graves, and now they were going to have to lie in them permanently. I did not wait for them to formulate another pathetic excuse or launch into another round of hysterical begging. I simply turned my back on them and walked purposefully toward the heavy glass doors of the lobby. My private security detail had already signaled my driver, and a massive armored black SUV was idling quietly right at the curb. The uniformed driver immediately stepped out and opened the heavy armored door for me, offering a respectful nod. I gracefully climbed into the luxurious leather back seat, settling into the quiet comfort of the vehicle. The heavy door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, instantly cutting off the faint sounds of my family sobbing on the cold pavement behind me. As the armored SUV smoothly pulled away from the curb, I did not bother to look back out the tinted windows. I kept my eyes focused entirely on the bright city skyline stretching out before me. My driver navigated seamlessly through the busy downtown traffic, taking me directly toward the Grand Convention Center in the heart of the city. Tonight, I was not just a survivor of a toxic, manipulative family. Tonight, I was being formally honored as the keynote speaker and primary recipient at the prestigious Top Women in Tech Award Gala. I was about to step onto a brightly lit stage to accept an award celebrating my relentless innovation, my corporate leadership, and my absolute refusal to be compromised by anyone. I had built a massive, undeniable empire, completely on my own terms. Despite every single obstacle my own parents had maliciously thrown into my path, I smoothed the emerald silk of my designer gown, taking a slow, deep breath of the cool, conditioned air inside the vehicle. The heavy, suffocating burden of seeking my parents' approval was permanently gone. The constant, agonizing pressure to shrink myself down just to make my sister and her arrogant husband feel superior was completely eradicated. I had successfully excised the toxic infection from my life with surgical precision, leaving behind a clean, healthy foundation ready for boundless future growth. My mother and sister were left behind, sobbing on the concrete pavement, completely consumed by the exact spectacular ruin they had arrogantly built for themselves. They had gambled everything on their unearned privilege and their fake social standing, and they had lost absolutely everything in the process. Justice had been served with flawless, brutal execution, and my new beautiful life was only just beginning today. The ultimate lesson from these journeys is that biological ties do not excuse toxic behavior or grant a free pass for exploitation. True power comes from establishing unyielding boundaries, building independent success, and refusing to shrink yourself to accommodate the fragile egos of manipulative relatives. Blood does not entitle anyone to steal your peace, belittle your hard-earned achievements, or dictate your intrinsic worth. When forced into a corner, responding with undeniable facts and strategic resilience will always shatter the illusion of fake prestige. If you found the strength to cut off toxic family members, please like, subscribe, and comment below.